coming in off 290 or something, you'll see that that's the much safer way to deal with that intersection and the new traffic from the ballpark and everything that's happening. And there's just kind of another aerial view. On the right, you'll see, hopefully in the next 5 years, that's what this area will look like. You see the campus fully built out from Madison Properties, the Table Talk development, everything, including the ballpark. And also you can see just how crappy it looked over here. And really it's just phenomenal that we were able to build an entirely new part of a city within just a few years. So really there's a lot of momentum that's happening here, and this is representative of that. Yeah?
So this area doesn't have that many lanes. So is traffic gonna be an issue with all of these apartment buildings?
Yeah.
And parking.
Parking.
Yeah.
Parking
Exactly.
is the hottest topic
Yeah.
in City Hall right now.
Okay.
And it's certainly become an issue, especially from our perspective. We have a lot of business owners who have been complaining about the parking situation, because usually, you know, their clientele wouldn't have much of a problem, and then you add a 10,000 seat ballpark right in their backyard, and it makes things a little difficult. So the municipal parking garage is going to be a benefit in trying to help alleviate some of those concerns. The tabletop, what's that?
Where?
It's across Madison Street.
Okay.
So Madison Street basically runs right here in front of the ballpark, and there's a municipal parking garage that's gone up if you see the red here. That's that one. The Boston Capitol, the orange, that development will have its own parking garage. So we're hoping that all the parking for that development will be covered. In terms of traffic, I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but it's kind of a difficult process to do a traffic study for all these developments as they're trying to figure out their financing and everything.
And for context, can you point out where we are exactly
Yeah,
on
yeah.
this map?
I can
Because
point that
it's counterintuitive based off the angle of it.
Yeah, so we're literally right across from the green.
Okay.
We're across the street from the green.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
And that's going to be what's called the Cove.
Cool. Thank you.
So just talk a little bit about the multifamily that's happening in the city right now. There's a lot of it. Like I said, there's 3,800 units of multifamily housing that's in the pipeline or under construction right now. Just a few of these projects are listed here, and we have some examples. Some of them are renderings, some of them are not. You'll see the courthouse lofts, the middle right one. The old Worcester County Courthouse was a 200,000 square foot massive building on Lincoln Square in downtown. And that fell into disuse over 10 years. They built a new courthouse, so nobody was using it. And Trinity Financial, another Boston developer, they bought the building up and they renovated it into 120 units of mixed income housing. And it's really cool because they actually incorporated a lot of the original elements of the courthouse in the units themselves. So if you look very closely, you'll see there's actually a judge's bench in the middle of that person's living room, which is kind of which is really cool, and the vaulted ceilings and everything. So it's a really interesting place to be. So another one, 145 Front at the bottom left here. That is the first high-end housing development in Worcester, multifamily at least. So that introduced 365 units of housing to the city. At a market rate that nobody thought would work. People were saying for years and years that you can't get serious luxury units in Worcester. And what this did was it really proved them wrong. It was located in the middle of downtown, and they opened it up, and within 6 months the entire thing was leased out.
What are those rates?
You're looking at probably $2,000 for a 3-bedroom kind of deal.
2,000 to 3,200 for studio.
Was that?
It's like 2,000 to 3,200 for studios, actually.
For studio, you're probably looking at about 1,800 to 2,000. So it's definitely higher end, certainly. And the thing is, it got leased up right away. So it certainly says something about the way that the market is heading in Worcester. So yeah, that's just a few examples. I mean, Walker Lofts is a really cool one, which is kind of down the street here. That was a very narrow building. I mean, the footprint of the building is as wide as this room. It used to be a 6-story factory and a storage space that was built maybe 120, 150 years ago. And a developer came in, Anthony Rossi, and he basically renovated it into, how many units of housing was that? 62 units of housing. And it's really nice in there. So, I mean, a lot of the story of new multifamily housing in Worcester has been historic rehabilitation, because we have such an old building stock in this city. We have a lot of our old industrial properties that after the post-war period fell out of disuse. There was a lot of flight, suburban flight that took place in Worcester. The population fell precipitously. And now in recent years, we're seeing that a lot of these buildings are getting a completely new lease on life. So a lot of the stick-built new construction is happening here in the Canal District, as you'll see across the street, even Madison Properties. But also we have a lot of these historic rehabilitations that are happening, which is preserving our great history that we have in the city and also providing the much-needed housing that we need. And these are some of the projects that are currently underway right now, just to give you an idea. So if you look at this one right here, that's the Madison Properties one that is currently under development right now. So the end result is going to be a 6-story housing development with ground floor retail located right across from the ballpark. It's called Soma, or for south of Madison Street. If you look here, this is a rendering of what the Cove is going to look like across the street. Basically, if you're on one of the balconies overlooking the ballpark, which is really cool. This is our largest multifamily housing development that we have in the pipeline right now, the one in the middle left. That's called Alta on the Row. It's being constructed by Wood Partners, which is a national development firm. They bought up this old property that used to be a church on Shrewsbury Street, which is sort of like a restaurant, Little Italy district. And basically they tore the church down. They're converting it into this massive housing complex, which is the largest thing that we have going in Worcester right now. They just broke ground on it recently. They're estimating it's going to cost a little over $100 million. Realistically, that's probably going to end up being closer to 150 with rising construction costs. So, as you can see, there's a lot happening in both historic rehabilitation and new construction. So certainly the trend of new multifamily housing is not going away, and we're seeing more and more of it every month.
Does Worcester restrict the amount of stories these multifamilies can?
No.
I hear you say 6 a lot.
6. So 6 is typically where sort of the agreed upon limit is for a lot of these multifamily housing. So the Cove actually, they originally planned on it being 13 stories, and they had to cut that in half. So construction costs kind of got in the way of a lot of those. There was also a few regulations that sort of kick in terms of what materials you need to source for the foundation of the building and as you go up. Once you get above 6 stories, so a lot of developers just elect to go with 6 or less. So that ends up being, yep.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that. I'm a developer, and the reason is because when you get to the high-rise threshold, you have to use a lot more steel.
Yep.
Whereas when you are in low-rise threshold, you just can basically use mostly lumber. So you also have to do additional fire control sections of the building when you are in the high-rise components. So yeah, it's been tough to do high-rise buildings, but that's pretty much why you see the 6 mostly.
Yeah. So besides multifamily, which is obviously the biggest thing that's happening right now in terms of economic development, there's also a real seismic shift in what's happening in Massachusetts in terms of biotech. So more and more people are starting to realize that Worcester has its own cluster of biotech and biomanufacturing that is more affordable than Boston and offers more space and more flexibility to developers. Kendall Square in Cambridge is where most of the biotech power in Massachusetts comes from, but that area, that neighborhood is only so large. And it really is becoming overgrown, and more we're getting people to look west beyond 128 and see that Worcester is a really viable option with great options for workforce and also great options for real estate. So biotech is really booming right now in Worcester. As you'll see, we have about 1.4 million square feet of lab space and biomanufacturing space in the city alone. We currently have a vacancy rate of 0.3%. There is one space that is currently up for lease, which has probably already been leased in the past week, and I haven't even known about it. So there's a lot going on, and what does that mean? That means we have to build new biotech buildings to accommodate the demand. We have about 500,000 square feet that's in the development right now. Madison Properties, that 200,000 square foot building, is one of them. Something I forgot to mention is there's a building going up behind left field in Polar Park here. That one's also going to be about 6 stories overlooking the park. Originally it was slated to be an office building. Now it's probably going to be a lab building as well. So you're seeing a lot of pivoting to multifamily and also to as you'll see, we have about 1.4 million square feet of lab space and biomanufacturing space in the city alone. We currently have a vacancy rate of 0.3%. There is one space that is currently up for lease, which has probably already been leased in the past week, and I haven't even known about it. So there's a lot going on, and what does that mean? That means we have to build new biotech buildings to accommodate the demand. We have about 500,000 square feet that's in the development right now. Madison Properties, that 200,000 square foot building, is one of them. Something I forgot to mention is there's a building going up behind left field in Polar Park here. That one's also going to be about 6 stories overlooking the park. Originally it was slated to be an office building. Now it's probably going to be a lab building as well. So you're seeing a lot of pivoting to multifamily and also to biotech in the city. Office space, of course, is kind of a rough market, and it has been since the pandemic started. Not that our office vacancies in Worcester are really hurting, but it's just not something that people are building on spec. And so biotech is where a lot of these developers have pivoted to. If you look behind the text here, this is called the Reactory. It's a biomanufacturing park that's located near the UMass Medical School, which is one of the premier medical institutions in Massachusetts, part of the UMass State University system, obviously. And that is really the main vehicle for new construction for biotech in the city. So there's about 200,000 square feet that's currently under development at the Reactory right now, including a Chinese firm which placed its first overseas location for biomanufacturing in the US in Worcester. And that one is looking to be, I think it's a $300 million development. So that's Wuxi Bio. Yep, so that's a significant one.
When is that going to come online? Like most of this stuff in a couple of years, or?
Yeah, Wuxi's been kind of tight-lipped about when they expect it. I know that they are I don't think that they've broken ground yet, but they're moving towards it. They recently revised their plans because originally I think it was a $60 million investment, and then they basically quadrupled their manufacturing capacity in the planned development. Did you have a question?
No. So, not about biotech, but it's more so about the retail space. That's so I get, if you drive by Worcester downtown, you realize that like a lot of the retail space, ground level, hasn't been flourishing. So there's a lot of vacancies. I see a lot of turnovers with companies. Do you track like the vacancies or kind of what's going on? You know, in Worcester as a whole, is it not just catering towards the right developments, right franchisees or what have you? Because there's a lot of space, but you see it vacant, and then it's a bunch of residential properties that are going up. But what keeps people grounded or in a central area is events, things that are happening. But it seems like we're always losing that.
Yeah, I mean, what we try to encourage, and we work a lot with our city development team, what we try to encourage collectively is mixed use development, absolutely. Like the Madison Properties one is going to be mixed use with ground floor retail, same thing with the Boston Capital one that's going up on Table Talk. So there's definitely a lot of priority that's placed on retail. Definitely what you're speaking to is to an extent true. There's been a lot of a struggle with the pandemic and trying to adjust and figure out how retail works anymore. And downtown, a lot of our retail that was food oriented struggled and has been struggling because of the lack of office workers that are downtown, and just trying to find ways to keep that active. We have a new grant program that's coming out, which will support retail spots. We have grant programs with City Hall that support vacant storefronts in their redevelopment. So there's a lot of things that we're trying to do to encourage that again, but really what it comes down to is walkability. And that's the essence of what we're trying to make Worcester. We're trying to make it so that you can easily walk to pretty much any amenity event that's in town, and make downtown and the Canal District truly neighborhoods and not just places that people drive to and then have to park and everything and cause traffic jams. So that's really the essence of what we're trying to encourage. So I think it's something that is going to take some time, and we're in the middle of some growing pains. The growth spurt that we went through is pretty unprecedented, not just for Worcester, but for cities in general. So it's going to be some time before we get on our feet with that, but retail, I think, is definitely something we're trying to make sure is right and done properly. So certainly. But any more questions related to that? So yeah, biotech, really strong. We have 25% in Worcester County, 25% of Massachusetts biomanufacturing jobs. So this is where the drugs are actually produced, not just where they're conceived in the lab. So we have a very strong base of biomanufacturing. AbbVie, for instance, is a manufacturer based out of Chicago, which employs hundreds of people, right next to the Reactory Biotech Park in UMass Medical School. So it's really a strength that we're trying to build on, definitely. Because we can't compete with, Kendall Square in Boston in terms of research and development. We can try, and we do have R&D lab space in the city, and we are building new lab space with these new developments. But biomanufacturing is really something that we have a unique strength in. And this is just something we like to sort of show people, call it sort of like the biopike, like the mass pike. The distance between Worcester and Boston is pretty much the same distance you have between San Francisco and San Jose. And so what we've really been trying to do is convince people that the distance is not that far. In Massachusetts, Boston to Worcester is like going to Texas. And we really have to appreciate that we have a very well-connected state and that our ecosystem can complement each other and not compete with each other. We are all in it together as a state, but not everything has to be within 128 and within 20 minutes of Boston. So in order to really alleviate a lot of the worst congestion in the world that Boston has, and sort of diversify the economy that we have, we really need to start looking west a little more, especially when it comes to biotech. So this is just, the circles represent the number of biotech firms. In Worcester, a lot of our biotech firms are actually located at an incubator called Massachusetts Biomedical Initiatives, and they have 60 startup biotech companies right in there right now that are developing pioneering ways to deal with chronic diseases that have never been solved before. So there's a lot of activity that's happening with biotech right now. And quickly, one thing I wanted to touch on was how higher education is really a huge strength of Worcester and how it really benefits our biotech cluster. So we have 8 colleges and universities in Worcester with 30,000 students between them, which is really a strength that a lot of cities and towns can't say they have. And we're really proud of our institutions of higher education that have given a lot to our community and have really contributed to our growth in biotech as well. Especially institutions like WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. It's commonly said that if Boston wasn't nearby and MIT specifically wasn't nearby, WPI itself would be the biggest thing for 4 states around. It is a really big STEM school, and the president of WPI actually just left to be the director of NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. So that just tells you a little bit of the caliber of people that go to WPI and the caliber of people that we come out of WPI. Also, I mentioned UMass Medical School. It last year was funded at $294 million in NIH funding, which makes it the largest amount of research funding across any Massachusetts institution by far, beating out the Broad Institute, MIT, Harvard.
I worked there. Broad.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
We have more money than that.
So UMass Medical School is really a breeding ground for a lot of the people who come out and work in biotech and R&D. So we have this fantastic institution in the city, including WPI, including Quinsigamon Community College, including the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. God, I got that right in the first try. Which also is based in Boston, but has a $300 million campus in downtown Worcester. And we have other universities as well, which contribute not only to our STEM fields, but also to our civic life and things like that. So certainly higher education has played a massive role in making Worcester the strong place to invest that it is. So that's pretty much it for me. I don't want to bother you guys too much more, so if you want to talk separately with me, definitely feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or something. My email's here. You can reach out to me if you have questions about the city or anything like that. And also you could just give me a call on my cell too if you really wanted to. But thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and always love to talk about Worcester. I could do it for hours more, I'm sure. And also, just important to note, yesterday Worcester actually celebrated its 300th birthday. So thank you all for visiting and coming to our great city. So thanks, guys.
Do you guys have any other questions for Mr. David by any chance? Alrighty. I think you covered everything, man.
All right.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely incredible.
It's incredibly exciting to see, kind of what the city's going to look like in the coming years. That's really cool. Just going to pull up that final thing there. One second, just some technical difficulties. Hey Andrew, what's going on right now? Where's our?
I will. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep. And you just have to bring it. So that's yeah.
Oh.
So I'm just rolling it.
All right. Anyway, sorry about the technical difficulties, guys. But yeah, thank you so much for coming to the meetup. That's the end of our kind of presentation for this month. Absolutely phenomenal. Thank you again, David. Next month today, we're going to be at the same time, same place. We have another Peaks and Properties event coming up. That's our second event. It was a really good time the last time. And yeah, we're gonna open things up to networking and food and drinks, and yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Good, how you doing? Yeah. Here. Two properties.
What do you do? Is that you don't do that full time?
No. Matt.